Hello ladies and gentlemen. Last week on my channel we looked at why the Super Nintendo received a redesign for the US market. Looking at the amount of views that video had, it appears that people are interested in the differences between the platform in different regions. So today I have decided to compile a list of my top 10 favourite Super Nintendo games that saw releases in Europe but never made it to North America. According to my online sources, I have managed to identify 62 different games that reached our shores that never saw the light of day in America. So sit back, relax, balance your bottle of Mountain Dew on your NES whilst I recount my top 10 favourite SNES games that Americans never had in their childhood. Pop and Twinbee is a shoot 'em up developed by Konami, who as we know were at the time a 5-star developer. It is notable that the European version of the game was published by Konami's Powercom software division and localised for the market. The player's objective is to manoeuvre their spaceship through a series of 7 stages and defeat every enemy who gets in the way, facing a boss at the end of each stage. This is a very solid shooter within the shoot-'em-up subgenre. You could argue that this missed out on a release stateside because the game was simply too cutesy and just didn't fit in with the naughty schoolboy attitude American marketeers were trying to portray at the time. One will guess though that this wasn't the case, as this didn't stop games like Kirby making it to those shores and becoming popular. My guess as to why it didn't make it was that it just looked simply too Japanese and anime influenced. American marketing gurus at the time used to spit in the face of anime and on a regular basis would completely change games' box art style and apply a good level of Californication to the previously well-designed characters such as Mega Man, in what one can only assume must have been to endorse steroids or something outrageous like that. Lucky for us though, in more cultured regions, Pop and Twinbee, along with its sequel, Rainbow Bell Adventures, were both given the green light and added to the fantastic library of PAL gems. Next up, we have Theme Park. As far as I'm aware, this game saw North American releases on the Sony PlayStation and PC, and a number of other platforms. However, 16-bit releases never reached that part of the world. It's notable the game was developed by Bullfrog Productions and programmed by everyone's favourite programmer, Peter Molyneux, making the bloody game British, just like me. The first plot of land you build your first theme park on is also in Britain. Once this is accomplished, you set off, expand your empire and take over the world. As you are probably aware, the first theme park game is brilliant. So it is very odd to me that this never saw a Nintendo release over in regions my continent colonised. With the Super Nintendo's popularity in the United States, Theme Park would have been a perfect addition to that library, especially when you consider the real aim of the game is to get your customers to eat as much junk food as possible. What is more American than that? Whilst the North American market were deprived of Theme Park for Nintendo, Japan on the other hand was a different story. They received a special localised version of the game called Shin Theme Park, which featured many graphical assets redesigned specifically to appeal to that market. I've not really looked into what those new elements are, but if I was to guess, the game probably had added little schoolgirls in school uniforms, or something perverted and Japanese like that. Next on the list, Super Bomberman 3. How on earth is this bloody classic missing from the North American library? This is a top level game. The game should be a national favourite in the US when you consider how much the United States loves bombing everyone. This game features the maddest multiplayer mode yet and supports up to 5 players. The overall animation graphics changed with the third instalment, with graphics that have been simplified compared to the previous versions. This entry looks more like the Bomberman game for the PC engine. Everything else though is a step up from the previous versions, and there is a vast variety of new gameplay mechanics to enjoy. The music in this game is also spectacular, as it consists of mostly improved remixed versions of previous older Bomberman soundtracks. From my experience, it is also of note that this is a lot more challenging than the first 2 Super Bomberman games, and to this day I have still never beaten the final section of the game, so if you fancy a challenge, give Super Bomberman 3 a try. Sensible Software developed Cannon Fodder, and the game was published by English entrepreneur Richard Branson's company, Virgin Interactive Entertainment, in 1993. Cannon Fodder is a military-themed action game with strategy and shoot-'em-up elements. The player proceeds through 23 missions divided into several levels each, making 72 levels in all. To quote the magazine, known as The One, they'd called the game sheer unadulterated brilliance and said Cannon Fodder is quite simply one of the best strategy action shoot-'em-ups to appear for ages. If I was to take a wild guess why this game never made it to the New World, I would make the assumption that it was probably due to Nintendo of America's censorship. Cannon Fodder has a darkly humorous tone, which commentators variously praised and condemned. Its creators intended it to convey an anti-war message, which some reviewers recognised, but the Daily Star and a number of other public figures derided the game. The game at the time sounded like it was a lot like my YouTube channel, as the content's satirical nature appeared to go over many blithering idiots' heads. The game also drew criticism from the juxtaposition of war and humour, and the fact that it showcased in London on Remembrance Day and used iconography closely resembling the Remembrance Day poppy. The Humans is a puzzle game published and released by GameTech in 1992. The goal of the humans varies per level, but is usually to bring at least one of the player-controlled humans to a designated end area, marked by a red tile. To do this, the player must take advantage of the human's ability to build a human ladder and use tools such as spears, torches, wheels, ropes, and in later levels, a witch doctor. The game was developed by Psygnosis Limited, who were a video game developer and publisher headquartered at Wavertree Technology Park in Liverpool, England. It is also of note that Psygnosis were the oldest and second largest development house within Sony Computer Entertainment's European stable of developers, and is best known for creating the Wipeout series. So that's a nice little factoid for you. Japanese space shooter Parodia saw a European release, which is another game which falls into the cute-em-up subgenre. Like Pop and Twinbee, this horizontally scrolling shooter was also developed by Konami. The game is a tongue-in-cheek parody of Gradius, hence the title of the game being a poor portmanteau of parody and Gradius. We established earlier in the video that American marketeers at the time appeared to hold back anything they deemed too Japanese. And personally, I do not think this game gets more bloody Japanese than a zany, wacky space shooter. Parodius doesn't really cater to the average American sense of humour, I suppose. From personal observations watching American sitcoms, the only form of humour they seem to regularly implement is sarcasm, which one must say gets rather tedious after a while. Personally, I think Parodius is a great game, but I like my humour how I like my martinis. Dry. Asterix and Obelix is a side-scrolling 1995 platforming game which is a true PAL region exclusive. I believe Asterix is an absolutely huge franchise around certain parts of my continent, such as in France and Germany for example. However, in my country it is probably equally as unpopular as it is over in North America. To be fair, the Brits have always been culturally very different to mainland Europeans. It has always annoyed me that they've tried to teach me French and German in school, when they could have actually been teaching me useful languages like Mandarin or Japanese for example. When will this silly little European Union learn that most of its stupid languages are completely useless on the world stage, and are only ever used to bicker between themselves? Anyway, swiftly moving on. Asterix and Obelix features great music and some of the smoothest animations on the entire platform. And oh yeah, it is also of note that the game was made by Infogrames, the company who now wear Atari's dead skin and has rebranded themselves and pretends to be them. It is the gaming equivalent of Silence of the Lambs. Next game of note I'm going to include is the sequel to Mr. Putty, known as Putty Squad. This game was originally programmed for the Amiga and ported over to the Super Nintendo. However, sadly, due to the system's demise, the Amiga version was never released. However, thankfully, ROMs of the game have now surfaced online, so you can play the game in all its Amiga greatness. Many people cite this game to be the best Amiga game never to appear on the Amiga, if that statement makes any sense. Putty Squad is a platform game in which the player controls a blue blob tasked with rescuing imprisoned putties. The player's putty can stretch in a variety of ways. Sidewards to cover ground faster, squash flat to absorb and pick up items, stretch upwards to climb, morph a fist to attack, or inflate to float upwards. From the graphics to the music, everything about this game reeks of Amiga. The game is particularly interesting as it is one of the final relics of the microcomputer era. The two final games on this list could both easily fit onto any best Super Nintendo games of all time list, no matter what regions we are talking about. First up here we have the Fireman. In this unique overhead shooter, you play as a fireman scaling a skyscraper, putting out all of the fires on the way. This is an interesting departure from the normal gaming tropes of the time, where the player actually tries to save people, rather than just killing everything. This is a true top bracket game, which is outstandingly fun to play. Actually, I liked it so much that I produced an entire standalone video about this game. I have no idea why this one never reached America, and you would have thought with the game's non-violent premise, the conservative Nintendo of America would have absolutely lapped this game up. The game is good, clean, old-fashioned fun, and I strongly advise that you download and emulate this game now wherever you live in the world. You will not be disappointed. Last on the list, Terranigma. Another game I have covered in depth on this channel. Terranigma is probably the best action RPG on the entire Super Nintendo platform, unless we are counting Link to the Past too. But Terranigma even gives that game a good run for its money, and could easily be considered its equal. People often cite Secret of Mana as the best game from the genre on the platform, but after a lot of back and forth, I think I'd now consider Terranigma the best of the whole bunch. Gameplay wise, I put the style of play as the exact middle ground between Secret of Mana and A Link to the Past. The game is also the sequel to Illusion of Time, which is known as the Illusion of Gaia in North America. The story is set over the planet's different continents, and I had a lot of fun reviewing this game as I travelled 5 of those continents last year and used stock footage of my travels from each. For a game with such a global theme, it is very strange that it wasn't released around the globe. But at the same time, I find it mildly amusing that it missed out on a North American release, especially when you consider most people who live on that continent never ever leave it for some reason. I couldn't imagine what it must be like to have never travelled. It is one of the only things in my life that is even more fun than gaming. Everyone loves going on a good old-fashioned conquest, surely? Thank you for watching today's video. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Now we live in a world where Super Nintendo emulation is easy and we can all play whatever games we like no matter what region we are in. What are your favourite games that saw European releases which missed North American shores? Do you think that I should have included different games on my list? Shout outs to Shizuka Kabayashi, Retail Archaeology, Andrew Bazansky, Peter Dawn, Mike Frost, Edward O'Reilly, Atinus Garcia and all of my other patrons. Thank you for all of your support. Yeah! If you want to be added to this prestigious list of patrons, then check out my Patreon page. There's even a few cool rewards. Ta-ta and farewell.